The Okavango Delta shimmered like glass, touched by fire, catching the first gold of morning and scattering it across a maze of water and wild. Channels wound through stands of papyrus and tall reeds that whispered in the breeze, their voices older than memory. Hippos grunted somewhere unseen, and the distant cry of a fish-eagle split the hush like a hymn. The world was waking, but here, at the delta's edge, time stretched thin and slow, as if even dawn knew to tread lightly. Lena Voss leaned over the edge of her small, flat-bottomed motorboat, watching the reflection of clouds ripple across the water's skin. Her fingers curled tighter around the steering handle, knuckles pale. She was a woman shaped by solitude and silence, her life measured in shutter clicks and the weight of moments few others ever saw. At 42, she carried both the confidence of experience and the private ache of distance. Her career had taken her across continents, glacial calving in Greenland, dust storms in Niger, tribes dancing by firelight in the Amazon. But Botswana was different. The Okavango wasn't just beauty. It was breath, a pulse, a memory waiting to be earned. She guided the boat slowly through the channels, the engine purring low. A faint layer of mist clung to the water like lace. From time to time, she paused, lifting her camera to catch the silhouette of an antelope grazing or the mirrored wings of a bee-eater skimming the surface. Every frame was a truth. And yet, this morning, Lena felt something stir, an unease she couldn't name. The air had a weight to it, a kind of hush that didn't belong. She rounded a bend where the reeds parted to reveal a small, grassy island no larger than a tennis court. A fever tree spread its limbs wide in the center, its bark pale and ghostly green. And beneath it, she saw them. Her heart lurched. A lioness lay crumpled on her side, breath shallow, ribs rising unevenly beneath her matted coat. Blood had soaked into the earth beneath her, fresh, dark, and cruelly vibrant. A deep gash tore across her flank, as if a predator or poacher's trap had struck her down mid-run. Her eyes were open but unfocused, the light in them flickering like a candle's final tremor. Beside her crouched a cub. 9 months, maybe younger. Not yet weaned from childhood, not yet hardened by the kill. His frame was lean but strong, a shimmer of muscle beneath the soft lines of youth. His ears were pinned back, eyes fixed on the water as if watching for something coming. His mane was just beginning to sprout, little tufts rising like a crown not yet earned. And yet, he stood like a king. Lena's breath caught as the cub let out a low growl, barely audible over the lap of water against her boat. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't fear. It was warning, a trembling, defiant noise that said, "Come no closer." She turned off the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the birds seemed to retreat into the branches. Lena reached slowly for her camera, the world narrowing to the circle of the lens. Through it, she saw the story no one else would tell. The cub, later named Kale, from a word meaning mighty warrior, stood guard, his small frame casting a long shadow across his mother's broken body. Lena would name the lioness Sapphira, for her eyes that, despite the blood, despite the agony, still gleamed with sapphire fire. Even on the threshold of death, there was a fierce intelligence in her gaze, a refusal to go quietly. Kyle pressed closer to his mother, the movement protective, instinctive. His fur was damp along his flank, streaked with her blood. Lena raised her lens. Click. Another. And another. Each frame was a heartbeat, and she could feel them now, hers, his, Sapphira's, intertwining. And then something moved in the tall grass across the channel. A rustle. The brief, deliberate parting of reeds. Lena's hand froze on the shutter. A crocodile. Number. The noise was too slow, too calculated. Another predator? Possibly. Lions had enemies in this land beyond fang and claw, humans who set snares for bushmeat, who feared or despised the great cats encroaching on their livestock. Lena scanned the shadows, instincts kicking in. Her hand moved to the telephoto, focusing through layers of grass. Nothing. Still, Kyle had sensed it. His growl deepened, his back arched slightly, and his tail lashed once. A cub like him should have been fleeing, but instead he planted himself firmer, as if drawing an invisible line in the earth. This is my mother, and you will not pass. Lena didn't move. She didn't even blink. She'd seen the aftermath of lion hunts before. Lions with bullets in their skulls, cubs mewling beside carcasses. But she'd never seen this. A living bond pressed into the soil, the moment before the world tipped into ruin or redemption. The cub turned his eyes to her. It was fleeting, a single, searching glance. But it struck her like a slap. Not animal. Not human. Just raw, soul-deep knowing. A question and a dare. Here to watch us die? Or to help? Lena lowered her camera. Her mind raced. Could she intervene? No, never interfere. That was the rule, carved into every conservationist's oath. But was this an exception? The cub was too young to survive alone. The mother wouldn't make it without medical help, if she could be moved at all. There were veterinary units stationed along the delta's rim. She had a satellite phone. But time was a knife, pressing into them all. Kyle stepped forward. Just one paw, the grass parting beneath him. Lena saw the quiver in his legs, the way he leaned too heavily on one side. He'd been injured too, though not as badly. Perhaps trying to fight off whatever had hurt Saphira. Perhaps dragged her here himself. The thought chilled her. How far had this cub come? She whispered aloud without thinking, her voice barely audible. You brave little king. The words were lost in the wind, but Kyle tilted his head. His ears flicked, and then, slowly, he sat, one paw resting on his mother's neck. Not out of possession, but love. Lena swallowed against the lump in her throat. This wasn't just a scene. It wasn't just a photo. This was a chapter in a story older than any lens could hold. The story of survival, of legacy, of grief and defiance, and something achingly close to hope. She took one last picture, then reached for the radio. Chapter 2. The Vigil. Lena anchored the boat 30 meters from the fever tree, where the earth held the shape of pain and persistence. The small island seemed frozen in time, as if the delta itself dared not exhale too loudly. Kyle hadn't moved, neither had Saphira, save for the trembling rise and fall of her ribcage. Through the eye of her telephoto lens, Lena saw the wound in excruciating detail. A wide, ragged gash tore diagonally across Saphira's flank, fresh and wet. The edges were too uneven to be a snare, not a bullet. No, it was the unmistakable signature of either a crocodile's crushing jaws or the rake of a rival lioness in a territorial fight. Whatever it was, it had nearly torn her open. Saphira's muscles twitched as if fighting both sleep and death. Then, slowly, achingly, she turned her head toward Kyle. Her tongue rasped gently across his face, blood-smudged and dry. And Kyle, with all the awkwardness of a cub still caught between childhood and instinct, leaned in and licked her wound, again and again, as if trying to erase the injury from her body with devotion alone. Lena's throat tightened. It was too human, too much. Her instincts as a documentarian warred with her instincts as a woman, a mother, a being not immune to tenderness. She had photographed the brutality of nature, the moment a leopard snapped a baboon's neck, the blank stares of antelope skulls in drought-ridden savannas. But this was different. This was not death. This was the refusal of it. She reached into her pack for the satellite phone, her finger stiff. The screen blinked to life. She pressed the call sequence for the Okavango Wildlife Rescue Network. A tone, then a click. Emergency line. Go ahead. This is Lena Voss, she said, voice low but urgent. I've found an injured lioness, severe wound to the side. She's still alive, but just barely. There's a cub, won't leave her. No signs of the rest of the pride. How close are you? I'm at the edge of Quai East, small island near Channel 23B. Fever tree in the center. They're exposed, no shelter. The operator didn't hesitate. We're alerting the vet team now. You'll have a boat in under 2 hours. But Lena knew the Delta had a rhythm of its own. Time here was a slow tide that could turn violently fast. Saphira's breathing was already shallow, erratic, and Kale, he was running on borrowed strength. She put the phone down and returned to her lens. Kyle had begun pacing around his mother in a tight, protective circle. Every few steps, he stopped and sniffed the air, eyes darting to the water. The sun had risen fully now, and with it, danger. Crocodiles liked the warm shallows. Hyenas stalked from the north, and already, somewhere to her left, she could hear the cry of vultures. A fish-eagle shrieked overhead. Kyle flinched, his body tensed, crouched, and for a moment he became something far more than a cub. He became a guardian, his small form planted between his mother and the world, shoulders hunched, eyes narrowed. A growl rumbled from deep in his chest. He did not look afraid. He looked ready. Lena swallowed. What are you, Kyle? She raised the camera again and began filming. Kyle's every move was a chapter. When he laid down with his paws over Saphira's wound, when he lifted his face at the sound of an approaching boat in the distance, when he stood alone, alert, as the wind stirred the grass behind them. Each gesture was loaded with intention. Not survival, but solidarity. Not escape, but presence. The footage would be priceless. But the story, it was already imprinted on her, deeper than film. At one point, Kyle turned toward her boat, nostrils flaring. He took a single step forward, not threatening but curious. His tail flicked low, ears alert. Lena's hand trembled as she kept the lens steady. It was as if he recognized her, or recognized that she was watching, and still chose to let her. Then he turned back to Saphira, circling again. The minutes stretched. Shadows moved across the grass, and Lena tensed. A dark shape slinked through the reeds. A hyena? No, too small. A monitor lizard. But it was enough to send Kyle bristling, his back arching, hackles rising. He hissed and lunged a step forward, issuing a snarl that was far too deep for his size. The lizard darted off. Kyle stood tall, shoulders square. Then, almost like a child who realized what he had done, he retreated quickly to his mother's side, trembling. He curled into her, and for the first time since Lena had arrived, he let out a whimper. A small, soft sound buried against her neck. Lena had to look away. Her eyes burned. She whispered again, "Hold on, little one." The sun climbed higher. Heat thickened. Saphira twitched once, eyes fluttering, and Lena noted it. Hope or a final flicker, she couldn't tell. Kyle began grooming her paw now, slow and rhythmic, as if trying to keep her tethered to this world. And then, at last, in the distance, the sound of a boat engine. The boat sliced through the channels with urgent grace. its engine a muted growl that rolled across the water like distant thunder. Lena had never been more relieved to hear a machine break the silence of the Okavango. She stood at the bow of her anchored skiff, one hand raised, signaling. The rescue boat adjusted course and pulled up quietly beside her, its presence casting long ripples across the fever-tree island. 3 figures disembarked swiftly, each moving with the precision of long-trained hands and long-burdened hearts. At the center was Dr. Thabo Mokoena, a 50-year-old veterinarian whose name echoed through southern Africa's conservation corridors. His tall frame carried the calm of someone who'd faced down charging buffalo, darted rogue leopards, and held newborn elephant calves in his arms. His silver-threaded beard gave him the look of an elder. But his eyes, sharp, clear, were very much present. Beside him was Naya, a young tracker, barely in her 20s, lithe and lean, her dreadlocks tied tightly back, her eyes constantly moving. It was said in Mon that Naya could read a lion's thoughts just by the way it shifted its paw. She moved more like a shadow than a person, trailing them, scribbling rapidly into a field journal, even while stepping over reeds, was Dr. Elena Ruiz, a Spanish-born behavioral ecologist with a passion for social carnivores and a deep reverence for the mysterious hierarchy of lion prides. They paused at the water's edge, scanning the island. Saphira still hadn't moved. Kyle stood above her like a sentry carved from fire and bone. His small body was tight with tension, tail twitching, eyes locked on the new arrivals. He didn't growl this time. He didn't roar. He simply stood, unflinching, watching. Elena lowered her journal. "He hasn't run?" Lena shook her head. "He hasn't left her side in over 3 hours." Thabo stepped forward, raising his binoculars. One look at Saphira and his jaw tightened. "That wound is septic. If we had gotten here any later—" "She's losing color in her gums," Naya murmured. "Breath's shallow. Infection's already taking hold." "And the cub?" Elena asked, eyes still locked on Kyle. Lena spoke without lowering her camera. "Protective. Hyper-aware. He's already chased off a monitor lizard. He's young, but he knows. He's defending her." Thabo exhaled. "That makes this harder." They all knew why. In most rescues, the injured animal was either alone, too weak to resist, or surrounded by pride members that would retreat under sedation threats. But Kyle didn't run, and he wouldn't. That much was clear. He was guarding a queen with the heart of a king. "We sedate him first," Thabo said. "He's fast, but if we dart Saphira first, he'll panic. Could run. Could attack. Worse, he might try to wake her." Nia nodded slowly. "And if he sees her go down before he's hit, he'll think she's dying." They stood silent a moment, the implications crawling over them like heat. "We dart them together," Thabo concluded. 2 teams, same breath. He knelt to prepare the syringes. One was a heavy tranquilizer cocktail, meant to bring down Saphira's full weight, somewhere around 130 kilograms. The second, smaller, was carefully dosed for Kyle's adolescent frame, around 40 kilos, lean and tense. Elena crouched next to Lena as the men moved. "You named him, didn't you?" Lena didn't answer right away. She focused the camera, capturing Kyle in profile as he touched his forehead to Saphira's paw. "Yes," she whispered. "Kyle, it means mighty warrior." Elena glanced at her. Fitting. 2 dart rifles were loaded. Naya and Thabo took position, crouching behind the reeds with clean lines of sight. Elena held the stopwatch. Lena moved to a slight elevation, capturing everything. The glint of sweat on Thabo's brow, the way Naya's finger curled softly around the trigger, and Kale, standing proud against an entire world that had already tried to take his mother. "Now," Thabo said. The darts sang through the air in perfect harmony. Thwip, thwip. Kyle flinched, the smaller dart catching him in the hindquarter. His eyes went wide with surprise. No roar, no cry. He simply turned toward Saphira. Her dart struck a second later, embedding in her shoulder. Kyle stumbled. His legs faltered as if the earth had slipped beneath him. He crawled forward, dragging himself the last few steps toward his mother. One paw outstretched, he touched her face. Then he collapsed, his eyes still open, his breath shallow but alive. Saphira groaned once, her great head dropping gently to the ground. Her flanks rose and fell, her tongue slightly out. The silence that followed was absolute. Then the rescue team moved. Thabo and Naya crossed the water swiftly, boots splashing as they reached the island. Elena and Lena followed with gear. A stretcher was unfurled, ropes secured. It took 4 of them to carefully lift Saphira, her massive frame limp but still radiating heat. Lena held her breath as Thabo examined the wound up close, muttering something in Zulu under his breath. "We have a chance," he finally said. "But she needs antibiotics, fluids, stitches." Within the hour, Kyle was loaded into a reinforced transport crate, his small body curled as if still in the act of protecting. Lena stood over him, heart heavy. "You did everything you could," she whispered. They pulled away from the island, the rescue boat now heavy with more than weight, with stories, with silence, with the fragile thread between life and loss. Lena followed in her own boat, trailing them like a ghost, filming, always filming. But this time, the story behind her lens was not just about lions. It was about something wilder, deeper. A cub who would not let go. A mother who had not yet died. And a place, this place, that knew how to test the heart until it broke or burned brighter. At the Maun Wildlife Sanctuary, nestled deep within the thickets of the Okavango's northern reaches, chaos moved in practiced silence. The facility, sleek, solar-powered, and engineered for urgent rescues, glowed beneath overhead floodlights as the rescue team rushed Saphira through steel double doors and into surgery. She lay on the operating table like a fallen queen, her chest barely rising, blood still seeping through hastily wrapped gauze. Her wound was worse than feared. As Dr. Thabo Mokoena and his surgical team surrounded her, the scans confirmed the worst. A shattered rib cage, a punctured lung, and extensive internal bruising. The trauma was consistent with a crocodile's death roll. Bones cracked from the pressure, organs battered from the thrash. But worse than the wound was the infection. "It's spreading," Thabo muttered, sweat already beading on his forehead. "We're fighting the clock now." The operation became a battle. 6 straight hours of draining fluid, cutting away necrotic tissue, repairing torn muscle, and flushing bacteria with powerful antibiotics. Oxygen levels dipped. Twice her heart fluttered into arrhythmia. Still, she fought. Somewhere in that battered body, the will to live flared like embers refusing to die. Meanwhile, in a separate enclosure down the hallway, Cale woke to the sterile, unfamiliar scent of the recovery ward. The sedative wore off in waves, first confusion, then panic, then rage. His eyes snapped open, golden and wide with fear. He let out a strangled roar, raw and cracking at the edges, and clawed at the crate's steel bars with frantic energy. Each strike echoed through the halls like thunder in a hollow cave. The sound wasn't large, it wasn't loud, but it was devastating. A cub's roar, wounded, terrified, and calling for the only thing that mattered. His mother. Lena stood a few feet from his crate, her camera hanging forgotten at her side. For the first time in years, she didn't raise it. She couldn't. Her fingers shook too much, and her throat felt too tight. The sound of Kyle's cry drilled straight into her chest. "He's calling for her," she whispered, barely audible. Beside her, Nia nodded, arms folded tight. Her eyes, usually sharp, constantly scanning, had softened. "He's not eating, not drinking. I've tried water, milk, even meat. He just stares through the bars. He won't stop calling." Lena stepped closer to the crate. Kyle didn't even look at her. His ears remained pinned, his breathing rapid. Blood from his claws smeared the edges of the metal. "I've never seen anything like it," Lena murmured. "He's not just grieving. He's unraveling." Just then, the double doors creaked open, and Thabo stepped out from the surgical suite. His scrubs were soaked with sweat, arms streaked with iodine and dried blood. His face bore the gravity of someone who had just played chess with death. "She's alive," he said. "But barely." Lena stepped forward. "Can she make it?" He wiped his brow and leaned against the doorframe. "If she stabilizes in the next 12 hours, we'll have a fighting chance. The lungs patched. We got the infection flushed, but her body's weak. She's holding on by will." Then his eyes flicked toward the crate, toward Kyle. "We need to keep him from hurting himself," Thabo said, his voice low. "But if we leave him isolated too long, he might give up." The silence that followed wasn't scientific. It was human. Lena stepped beside the crate, one hand resting lightly against the bars. Her voice was firmer now, clearer. "They need to be together. He's not just her cub anymore. He's her guardian. He thinks he failed her." Eleanor had joined them, still reviewing footage on her tablet. She looked up, conflicted. "It's against standard protocol," she said. "You never reunite until after full stabilization, especially not with trauma cases." "But he's not acting like a normal cub," Nia countered. "None of this is normal." They all turned to Kyle, who had stopped roaring now. He was simply lying in the back of the crate, chest heaving, eyes wide and vacant. Elena took a breath, then another, and nodded. "Let's try it." By dawn, Saphira's condition stabilized, her breathing steadier. Thabo made a daring decision. Place Kyle in a secure enclosure beside Saphira's recovery cage, separated by reinforced glass. The moment Kyle saw his mother, his roars ceased. He pressed against the glass, his body trembling, and began to purr, a deep, resonant sound that filled the air. For the first time, he ate, his eyes locked on Saphira's still form. Lena's camera captured the moment, her hands shaking. The image of Kale's small face against the glass, Saphira's chest rising faintly beyond, was raw and powerful. Over the next few days, Saphira grew stronger, her wounds healing slowly. Kyle calmed but remained vigilant, sleeping only when Saphira stirred. On the 6th day, Thabo allowed a supervised reunion. The staff braced for trouble, but Kyle moved with gentle precision, curling up beside Saphira's uninjured side. She licked his face, a weak but loving gesture, and the sanctuary staff stood in Saphira's recovery was a testament to her strength. But her lung damage was permanent. She'd never hunt at full capacity again. Kyle, however, was a born survivor, his instincts sharpening with each day. Lena spent weeks filming, her documentary evolving into a saga of sacrifice and survival. She shared a clip online. Kyle standing over Saphira as a crocodile's shadow loomed in the water, his tiny roar defying the beast. The video exploded, shared millions of times, sparking global support for Delta conservation. The team faced a critical decision. Saphira couldn't return to the wild, but Kyle could, with training. They created a 25-hectare sanctuary called Saphira's Haven, a protected oasis with waterways and prey. Kyle would stay until he was ready for release, learning to hunt under Naya's guidance. The sanctuary was equipped with cameras, allowing researchers to monitor their progress without interference. One evening, as Lena filmed Saphira limping across a grassy knoll, Kyle trailing her like a shadow, she noticed something strange. Kyle stopped, his ears twitching toward the horizon. A low rumble echoed, a rival lion pride. Lena's heart raced. Saphira was too weak to fight, and Kale was no match for adult lions. The team scrambled, but before they could act, Kyle did something unthinkable. Kyle sprinted toward the sound, his small body disappearing into the reeds. Lena, Thabo, Nia, and Elena followed, tracking his GPS signal. They found him on a rise, facing 3 young male lions from a neighboring pride. The males, lean and aggressive, had likely scented Saphira's weakness. Kyle stood his ground, his roar echoing across the delta. The males hesitated, confused by the cub's audacity. Lena's camera rolled, capturing the impossible. A 9-month-old cub holding off a trio of predators. Saphira, sensing danger, struggled to her feet and limped toward Kale, her own roar joining his. The combined sound, mother and cub united, shook the air. The males, startled, retreated into the dusk. Thabo whispered, "I've never seen anything like it." "He's rewriting what we know about lions." Elena nodded, tears in her eyes. "He's not just a cub. He's a protector." Saphira's haven became a permanent home for Saphira, where she adapted to her limitations, mastering stealth to catch smaller prey. Kyle thrived, his hunting skills honed through months of training. The day of his release came 10 months later. Fitted with a GPS collar, he was taken to a distant part of the delta, far from Saphira's haven, to ensure he'd establish his own territory. Lena, Thabo, Nia, and Elena watched as the crate opened. Kyle stepped out, his eyes scanning the wilderness. He glanced back at Lena, his gaze steady, then vanished into the tall grass. Saphira, alone in her sanctuary, let out a single, mournful roar that night, answered by a distant call, perhaps Kale's, perhaps the wind's. 3 years later, GPS data showed Kale had become a pride leader, his territory spanning 50 square kilometers. He'd sired cubs, his bloodline strong. Saphira, now a regal figure in Saphira's haven, moved with quiet grace, her limp a badge of survival. Lena's documentary, The Cub Who Carried Hope, won global acclaim, raising funds for wildlife corridors and anti-poaching patrols. Lena visited Saphira often, her camera capturing the lioness's serene strength. One evening, as the delta glowed under a crimson sunset, Saphira climbed a low hill, her eyes fixed on the horizon. A faint roar carried across the water. Kale's, unmistakable. Saphira's ears perked, her tail flicking, as if she knew her warrior was out there, thriving. In her final journal entry, Lena wrote, "I came to the Okavango for lions, but I found a story of a cub who carried hope for his mother, and a mother who lived for him. Their bond taught me that love can defy the wildest odds, binding hearts across time and distance." A bronze statue of Saphira and Kale, the cub standing guard, was erected at the sanctuary's entrance. Its plaque read, "For Saphira and Kale, whose love lit the way for hope." Visitors wept at the story, shared through Lena's lens, of a cub who faced death itself to save his mother. Their tale became a global symbol of resilience, inspiring new conservation efforts and reminding the world that love, in any form, is the fiercest force of all.